Okay, this is a movie review, and the movie is It's a Wonderful Life. It came out in 1946. It was directed and produced by Frank Capra, and it's just great. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. It's one of the greatest movies of all time. So here's Jimmy Stewart playing George Bailey, and here's his wife, Donna Reed, Mrs. Bailey, and there's their children. It's just so magnificent. I can't even put into words how great this film is. In some ways, it's a little bit like Christmas Carol, the book by Charles Dickens, and the movie Scrooge and whatnot. In other ways, it's just totally unique. It's sort of like the ultimate tragedy but it becomes, a comedy. It starts out with a conversation between God and an angel. So this is supposed to be God. This is one of the angels. That's God's assistant. And basically says, you know what, George Bailey's in trouble. And tells the angel, I think you should help him out. And the angel wants to win its wings. So the angel wants to... but one of the things you notice is the idea of Christmas, it brings everybody together. Remember, religion means religare, legare, to ligate, to tie together. So it ties the people together. Okay? And some people say, oh, we don't need religion. Oh, yeah, you do. You currently have a religion, and it's called atheistic Darwinism, in case you didn't know. And believe me, it wants you to be a slave. Okay? Whereas Christianity wants you to be free and happy. So here is George Bailey, and here he is when he's going through some major difficulties, and this is Clarence. Clarence is actually the avatar, human form of an angel. And it's his job to try to save George. So earlier in the movie, this is George when he just gets married to Mary. They've been friends off and on since they were in high school. And George had wanted to travel around the world. They had all these big plans to be an architect, builder, to do all kinds of wonderful things. But every time he was ready to go, something happened. His father died. Then because his father died, he had to work in the bank. Then he wanted to go to college when his brother came back home, but there was some other issue and he couldn't. His brother got a great job in another town, so he couldn't leave the bank, the Bailey Savings and Loan. So he was trapped in this little small town, and he was not happy about that. Whereas his wife, Mary, she loved him, and she made everything as good as it could be. And that's a good wife, somebody who makes your life better on a daily basis, okay? And so here he is. This is at their honeymoon. They had wanted to travel around the world again, but they couldn't because there was a run on the bank. So she took this old abandoned home and fixed it up and made it into their honeymoon house, and it was very nice. What I'm trying to say is this book gets everything right. It's beautiful. It's perfect. This movie is like better than you can imagine a movie being. It's so great. It's one of the all-time greatest movies. You should watch this every year. With somebody you love, it's the best movie. Okay, so here's Old Man Potter. And Potter is the competitor, banker, businessman in the movie, and he's a real jerk. He could care less about the proles. And I think he's pretty typical of how most financial institutions look at the proles. He thinks that, they're basically vermin. Okay, and then when there was a run on the bank, Bailey Savings and Loan almost went out of business. But luckily, George was able to convince the population, and there was a cohesion of the population. They're all Christians. They all know Christmas is coming up. They all have some shared sense of the history of the town, the history of his father, the history of this Bailey Savings and Loan having tried to help them when they financed their homes, for example. So it's great. And then, here is, when a moment of happiness when he's with the whole family. And George had some really difficult times. And, you want to see happiness. There's different types of happiness, but one of the best types of happiness you'll ever have is to be with your family on Christmas Day. It's a beautiful thing. And, all these women they're lied to out there thinking their career is going to be their happiness. No, I never met a woman in my life over 40 who didn't recognize her family as being a bigger source of happiness than her career. So it's just beautiful. I mean, like I said, this movie is like perfection in a movie. It's as good as a movie could be. And this is where George, he'd been so sad because his bank had lost a whole bunch of money because Potter actually stole money from them, and he didn't understand what had happened. And he thought that, he was better off dead than alive. And the angel Clarence sort of gave him a moment, a little bit like the Ghost of Christmas Future in Christmas Carol with Scrooge, whereby he got to see what life would have been like if he was not there. And once he realized that, it helped him to have an objective perspective from a different point of view, that he was pretty lucky, and he got an attitude of gratitude. And he's like, call me back, Clarence, please, I want to live again. It's actually rather beautiful, the whole scene. And Mary helped stir up the interest of the townspeople to help George when he was bankrupt, and they raised enough money. A little bit of a spoiler alert here, but this movie, you want to see it over, even when you know the movie. I'll be honest, I cried. It was so beautiful. It's just the perfect movie. It's great. It's right in every way. It's good in every way. And that was his brother, who almost died when he was a kid, 8 years old, and George had saved him by diving into the frozen ice water. There was a break in the ice, and he fell when they were sledding down a hill, and George saved him. He went on to be a hero and a great pilot. This is just, one of the scenes. This guy, Mr. Gower at the pharmacy, had accidentally mixed up a dosage on a medication, and George, when he was a kid working for him, had corrected the error, and at first Mr. Gower had smacked him in his bad ear. But now Gower's alive and actually helps him out, so that's a good scene. And Uncle Billy's a good guy, but he don't have the best memory. His mother's alive and doing well. There's a whole bunch of people. This lady's a nice lady, and she's okay. George helped her. Here's another one of his buddies, a taxi driver. You get to know the characters. It's great. Okay, and here's George at Mary realizing, how fortunate he is, how lucky he is. And this is one of the symbols of the movies that every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. And they're just talking about that. That's his daughter Zuzu. And it's all beautiful. It's all good. And here's it ending at the end with the bell ringing, angel gets its wings. And I would say you just have to see it, but it's magnificent. It's right and good in every way, and it's worth watching every year. And I can honestly say this is one of the greatest movies of all time. I love this movie.